All right, we're going to do some coding now, and I'm going to try and teach you some basics, and then we'll try and do a graphical vector addition problem with 2 vectors. And the goal here will be hopefully you can extend that to 3 vectors and beyond. So let's start with a screen share. All right, and so first you're going to go to glowscript.org, and just so you can see this as I sign in, I know my face is in the upper right corner, I think. So I'm going to click this button that says sign in right here. And when I do that, let's see, let's use this one. All right. And now I shouldn't need the top right corner too much. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Now, your screen might look a little bit different, but the idea is you want to hit the here button. So I don't know if you can see where I'm clicking here, but right down here, there's the word here. Yours might be in a slightly different spot. And you could go into your programs here and you could create a new program. Now, before you get too far along, check the top left corner here. Notice where it says public or private. So what you could do is you want to make sure your file is public. Why? Because eventually, well, did that not go? Let's get that in there. Oh my gosh, this is going to happen to you quite a bit. So it's actually good that that happened. I'll show you if this happens during your code. One thing you could do is if that kind of error happens to you in your code and you've been typing and you're worried that it didn't save, just quickly hit Control A and Control C and copy everything that's in your code. You could then paste it in to a new code if the computer locks up and you lose it. So if at any time GlowScript locks up on you, just hit Control A, Control C, and copy whatever you've got on the screen so you don't lose your work if it doesn't save. All right, that said, I'm going to go into here and create a new program. Yours should say public. Mine says private. Say coolest code ever. Notice I'm using the period between the words. So this is, it's a convenient way to indicate the start or end of words in this GlowScript situation. All right, so I come into here, and then the next thing I want to warn you about is this header immediately. This header has to be done exactly the way it's shown here. If you delete this, or if you change any part of that, or if you accidentally copy it a second time, you might say, why would I ever do that? Well, later on, I might give you a piece of code and you might accidentally have this. This will all cause an error. So we can't have 2 of these. We can't have less than 1 of them. We need exactly 1 statement that looks exactly like that. GlowScript, and notice the S is capital there. All right, so now we're going to come into here, and just to make sure, I know my live stream sometimes comes off as blurry, I'm going to jack this screen up a little bit. So let's say we have 2 numbers. A is equal to 2 and B is equal to 3, and let's say C, we want that to equal A times B. And now when I run this, nothing will happen. There it is. Nothing happened. You've got to tell the computer explicitly if you want it to print the output. So let's say we want to print C. So now when I run this program, great. So it outputted that value. Now I know I might be going a little quick, but yeah, that worked. Now this print statement by itself isn't very useful. So maybe because pretty soon we're going to have more than one thing at once. So more than one thing outputted. So we might need to add in a string. And so when I type this line of code, this will add this, everything inside those quotes is a string. All right. And so when I do this, it will print out that entire string, and then it will add to the end of that, it will add this quantity A. So this plus A. And if I wanted to, I could even say, let's do this. We'll say space dot 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 for real. And notice I have already thrown a curveball at you. Notice on this side I use double quotes. On this side I use single quotes. You could use either. All right. So when I print this, let's just verify that works. So notice it's a lot easier to understand your print statement if you put something like this in here. So take the time to set it up. And in fact, you could even do another level where you specify the sig figs. So I could do what's called an F statement here, right? And then let me go in here, take this all out. Now, this will give me trouble. Notice the coloring just changed. I have a single quote on one side and a double quote on one side. Let's do all single here. All right. And so now what I'm going to do is say, we'll do A, and then I think it's colon 0.2 F. Where's my other bracket? With those curly brackets. So let's make sure I didn't screw this up by running this. Notice it gives me 2 sig figs now. So a lot of times we're going to kind of ignore this, but I just thought I'd show you in case you wanted to know. So for now, we could actually print out all of these. Once you get one, you just hit Control C, and you could change them up, and you could print them out. And then obviously we could do C. Oops, sorry, excuse me. And this will print out all 3. And so now we see our code this is starting to be kind of a good pattern, right? And you could even say the value of C equals A times B. And so again, this part of the code is not going to execute because it's inside that single quote. So that's just a string. All right. So that's great. Next, we want to be able to do physics. And in physics, we need vectors. So in this case, these formatting codes are not going to work out too well for the vectors because there's 3 components for vectors. So I'm just going to take that out for right now and get this back to where we were. All right. Apologies for the delay here. And you'll notice I'm trying to be consistent with my spaces. All right. So I don't really care how you choose to do things. You could choose, for example, up here, you could just write this like this. And this is a lot more succinct, right? But what I'm trying to do is be somewhat consistent with my spaces. And so I don't know if this makes it easier or harder for you to read, but at least no matter what I do, you're starting to get used to it. And you may change conventions between one code and the next, but generally speaking, if you could choose early on a convention for how you want to space things and just try to stick to it, that will make it easier to read your codes later. All right, enough said on that. Oh, and let me change that to C. All right, so now my question is, what if we want to do vectors here? And vectors, just saying multiplying, that's a little bit tricky because there's a dot product and a cross product. So let's start with vector addition. So let's say we're going to add 2 vectors, and now I need these to be vectors. Well, let's say vec is 1, let's do 3, 0, 0, and explain what this means. So this vector is 3 in the x, 0 in the y, and 0 in the k hat. So notice this would be 3 I hat plus nothing else. And let's say this vector is 0 in the x, 4 in the y, 0 in the k hat. So again, this is basically 4 j hat. So what's cool about this is Python will go into here and say, all right, well, I know that A, right? When you get to line C, it says C is going to be something. Well, what is A? A is a vector. Okay. B is also a vector. It is legal to add 2 vectors together so the code can execute it without giving an error statement. So then it will output this value C. Since A and B are both vectors, it knows that C is a vector, and I don't need to declare that it's equal to a vector. So when I run this, let's see what happens. All right, and so this makes sense. 3 in the I hat plus 4 in the j hat is 3 I hat, 4 j hat. Great. Okay, so far, so good. Just let me check where I want to go next. Okay, so we've added these 2 vectors. We've mentioned consistent spacing, the glow script header, Oh, commenting out. All right, so the hashtag symbol is a comment. So when I do this symbol in here, this will comment out that line 3 of the code. I can delete this, and now it's not commented out anymore. And an interesting thing here is I can highlight all these, and I'm going to hit Control slash. That's the slash that's under the question mark. I forget if that's the front slash or the back slash. My apologies. That's just not something I've ever cared about. So, and notice I'm just hitting that slash back and forth. And I hope you could see that on my screen. We see that the code in whole blocks will be commented out. Now, this can be very useful. Like, let's say I want to just check A and B and see if A and B are working, and I'm getting distracted by this C. So maybe I'll comment out this line of code. And now let's think what the code should do. A is there, B is there. When the computer sees this pound symbol, it says, or the hashtag, it just skips this line. And then it's going to come into here, print A, that should work, print B. But notice when it gets to this line, everything's going hunky-dory until you get to the very end. At the very end, you're asking the computer to put the parameter C in there. Well, because you commented out this parameter, it doesn't know what C is. We should get an error. Let's see what happens. Notice that it did actually do the values of A and B, but then we're getting this error here. It says C is not defined. So if I go into here, I'm like, what is C? I could go backwards through the code, say, oh, whoops, I forgot to uncomment that. All right, so now it should run. Great. Okay, cool. What if you wanted to get the magnitude of this vector? Well, you might say, oh, couldn't I just get out a piece of paper and do that? You could, but why not search the help file? So in the upper right corner, there's a help file, or you can literally do a web search. And so let me just do that really quick. So if I do a quick web search, I could say, you can see I had one there to remember that silly formatting thing. But what if I wanted to do vector in GlowScript? So I'm just typing vector in GlowScript into the search, and it gives me all kinds of stuff, and I could go find the information about how to do all kinds of operations, and they're all there. So if you wanted to figure out how to do a, whoops, where did I go here? Oh, I lost it here. Oops, let me go back. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, so in this case, you could search the help file for how to figure out the magnitude or how to write a unit vector. Okay, there's a couple different ways to do that. You could get the angle between two vectors, all kinds of stuff with the code. So I'm going to leave that to you to read the help file or to web search for that, and you can figure out what statements will give you those outputs. Next up, okay, this is great, but this is kind of the bare minimum. We could get the answer, but it's sometimes not. Part of the reason we're coding is to get a visualization of things so we could see what things look like, not just have a bunch of numbers. If I wanted a bunch of numbers, I could do this in Excel or all kinds of different ways. So let's say we want to have an arrow, all right? And I want this arrow to represent the vector A, all right? So for now, I'm going to say there's a parameter, or sorry, a function called arrow in GlowScript. Now, if I just run this like this, let's see what happens. Whoa, we've got a very big file here. So you can see there's an arrow on the screen, but that doesn't necessarily represent A, and we've got all our parameters down here beneath this. So let's go back to edit the program. Let me get that back big just so it's not as blurry. Okay. So now in this case, we could actually change the parameters of this arrow. And then, so when we're first starting, you might just change it inside. So this is an attribute of the arrow, position. All right. So this is the position attribute. Position should be a vector. All right. And I'm going to put both parentheses just so I don't forget. So this position vector, let's say it's at the position 2, 1, 0. It's just sitting out there. We could say 0, 0, 0, but I want to choose this for reasons that will come obvious later. All right. And now axis. All right. The axis of this arrow is basically the vector you want it to represent. So the position of the arrow is the tail's location. So again, the position attribute of the arrow tells you where its tail is located. The axis attribute of the arrow tells you basically the vector that it's supposed to represent. So in this case, let's just say that's A. And now there's another attribute called color, and I'm going to choose to make that a vector. And let's just say that's 1, 0, 0. So in the color vector, the first number is 0 to 100% red. So that's 100% red. 1 is 100%. No green and no blue. So you could mix the colors if you want. That's great. Let's run this and see what we get. There we go. We've got an arrow. Okay, cool. Now, we spent all that time on the first one. Hopefully we can just copy this, paste it, and change this to B arrow. Now, whenever you cut and paste, you could run into trouble. So let's say this one's at 2, -1. Its axis should be B. And let's put in a different color. Let's say this one is green. Okay. So let's draw both of those. And notice we see these here. And now what I'm doing right now, I actually have both fingers on the mouse right now. So I'm using 2 fingers pressing both mouse buttons, and I'm zooming out or zooming in. And when I let go, it stops. I could also press and hold just the right mouse button and swivel this thing. And so notice we're seeing these vectors in 3D. All right, that's cool. So again, whoops, both mouse buttons, zoom in and out, right mouse button only, swivel. Let's go back in and edit this program. That's cool. This is great. But remember, we want to do graphical vector addition. So if I could, give me a second. In graphical vector addition, normally we put the first vector here. Okay. We've got a vector. The second vector, whoops, is supposed to go with its tail at the tip of the first vector. If there was another vector, we'd stick the tail of the third vector at the tip of the second vector. And then in the end, let me move some stuff around and zoom here just so I've got some room. We know, let's say the output C is the result. It goes from the first tail to the last tip. So that should be what the graphical vector addition of this looks like. All right. And obviously some labels would be useful in my code, but I'll just give you that information in the comments or in the Canvas quiz that you're going to take later. All right, so let's keep that in mind here while we're working on the code, and let me get back into it here. So we've got these vectors, and I don't need these print statements right now, so I'm going to get rid of them just so I have some more room. All right, now I know I want the B arrow's position. I don't want it to originally be here. So one of the things I could do is I could change this. Now, I could change it inside of here, or I could immediately do it right afterwards. Watch this. B arrow dot pause. So what does this mean? I don't mean like pause the music. I mean position. So you're going to hear me say that a lot. Right here, this says go into the B arrow, look for the position attribute, and let's change it. I want to change it to be at the end of the A arrow. Well, where is that? Think. Oops. This is that arrow I was telling you about. I'll show you how to handle this kind of error. Basically, copy everything. You could click OK, copy everything on the screen, and then you won't lose anything you've typed. If you just hit run right now or refresh, you might lose some stuff you've typed. So if this error happens to you, copy everything and get out of it. So hold on. I got to clear my Zoom annotation. Sorry. That's a good time to have that happen, actually. So let me get rid of this. Let me get back to this. All right. And so here, that is A arrow dot pause. So if I want to get all the way over to here, that's where I want B arrow's position to be. So notice I want to figure out this position vector, and it should be the A arrow's position, and then I have to add the A arrow's axis. All right, so there's a couple of ways to do that. One way would be just to say this is at A arrows dot position plus A, and that should work. Now, another thing you could do is you could also say A arrow dot axis, and that's just kind of the way I'm going to choose to do it right now. The idea is it says, okay, draw these two arrows. And now the computer is going to draw them so fast, it's going to get to this next line of code immediately, and we won't even see the code draw it at this first position. It's immediately going to change this position to A arrow's position, right? So it'll go up into the A arrow, look for its position attribute, find that vector, grab it, and stick it here. So the vector 2, 1, 0 will go here. Then it's going to find the axis vector, right? And add that to it. So right here, this axis vector, it's going to say, okay, go into A arrow right here, go into the axis, and get this. Well, then it says that's A. So then it says, okay, go look for A, that's here, and that's going to add in that. So when I run this one, that will do it. Finally, let's throw in another vector here. We want C arrow, and we want this position. Remember, the tail should be at A arrow's position. Its axis should be C, and now we should get the graphical vector addition shown. And to make that cyan, let's just do 0, 1, 1. This should draw all three arrows in the correct spot. Let's run it. I'm going to clear out my annotations while that's oh, wait a minute. Okay, remember what I said? It's not letting me run because I forgot this. So I'm going to hit Control A, Control C. Now I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to lose half of what I typed. I'm going to go into here. Notice I lost all that, so I'm going to hit Control A and Control V. Notice I was very careful not to get 2 copies of this glow script in there, right? That's what might happen is that's how that happens. So now let me run this program and clear out my annotations. And there's exactly what we were expecting. All right, and so this will get you there. There's a bunch of different correct ways to do this, right? You could probably think of other ways to figure out this statement, but this is probably a powerful one. And I think that's all we needed to do for right now.